So does everyone see the shared screen then?
Yes.
Okay. So we are just going to give you a brief update on the status of the data rights policy. First of all, note that we renamed it the Rubin Data Policy. We even have a new front page to the policy that's shown here. You can easily find the current policy by going to this short link, the LSST LDO 013 link. That version is the one that's basically been approved by the NSF and DOE. This was last November. I'm showing the revision date now as April 26th since I changed the title and the title page, but the content is really from last November, at the time when some of the SCs and the SAC had given us significant input. And much of that input is in this draft and changes and edits, but not all of it. We're still working on some of the things. And in particular today, we'll address some of the more serious concerns that the desk in particular has raised. And I just want to thank everybody for their input, and in particular Rachel Mandelbaum and the desk for their very careful and considered input on questions that are important for the science collaborations in particular. And of course, the SAC did a lot of work in helping us improve this last fall to get to this version. And so thank you very much. And we will continue to revise this as appropriate and as we discuss with you, our science stakeholders, how to best make it work for everybody. The goal is to have a data rights policy that maximally allows everyone to do science and collaborate. And so that's the goal. We have some constraints from the agencies about data rights and who can access the data, and we just have to account for those as we go forward. There is a second document that you may be interested in. It's a high-level document on data management principles. It's a construction project document, LPM 151, and you can also easily find that using the short LSST links. So as I said, many updates leading into this version from last November. There are a few things that you all have asked that we haven't yet updated in this document that you'll find on the web. The document that is being modified by the team, it already has a few of the things that we'll talk about today in it, but it has not been uploaded to the web, which is basically the DocuShare site. And as I mentioned, there's a few things the SAC is interested in that we still haven't addressed. The details today that we'll go through in a few slides are mostly from the desk. And at some point we will have to go back to NSF and DOE and show them the revisions and ensure that they are happy with it. This data rights policy, because of the connection to the internationals, is one of the few documents that the agencies are really keep a close eye on. It's a bit of an outlier in that sense. So builder status, ongoing data rights for builders. So the proposed change to the policy, this is, I think, of interest to all the science collaborations, but was proposed by the desk, is that the science collaborations have a process. People become a builder, which confers certain rights within the collaboration for them to work on certain projects and co-author papers. And the idea is that for those who are in the international community or might move to the international community outside of Chile and the US, if they have have contributed significantly to the effort of the collaboration, which in a sense contributes significant effort to the overall science output of LSST, they should be allowed to have indefinite data rights no matter where they go. And of course, this is a strong incentive for people to work hard, contribute, be rewarded, and produce LSST science, which is what certainly our goal is. It allows you as science collaborations to plan long term, especially for your young members. And we, the operations team, believe that this is a fair and good thing to do. So we are supportive of it. We believe such a change would need approval from NSF and DOE. And it may be that they generally approve it, but would always want to know where a specific data rights holder was going to. And we would have to accommodate that oversight from NSF and DOE. So we will work on an appropriate modification to this aspect and try and move it ahead. The observer status, the sense was that it would be good to have observer status in science collaborations for those who do not currently have data rights, which might be someone outside the US and Chile, but not involved in a prior data rights agreement. This is something that we think would be useful for developing new contribution proposals. It may be that as we go through the slide deck and we get to a few slides down that we decide that there's really no issue here. But the main point was we wanted to find a way to do this, and if we don't see any issue on our side, and we would just wonder if there was any issue with the science collaborations. I suppose one issue might be whether or not the science collaborations wanted someone to be an observer in their collaboration, which is obviously a decision that I think the collaboration should make and not necessarily the operations team. So I think that can work, and maybe it's not even an issue. The grace period is a bigger issue, and it's fraught with several concerns, mostly coming from both our managing organizations and the agencies. So the question is, why is the grace period, which is in this item in the policy Depot 404, specific to US and Chile? And not specifically called out for the international contributors. So first of all, I think we've always intended that international contributors and their data rights, the specific details of those will be spelled out in the MOAs that we signed with them. And NSF and DOE have also signaled that extensions to data rights for people moving outside of the US and Chile might need their approval, depending on where they're moving to. So the main point here was that the agencies see the data rights as very valuable, and they have always told us that they need to be, we need to be able to collectively answer upward why we're allowing this US-funded project to confer or deliver data to people outside the US. And I think generally everything is straightforward. So there's a sense that these are very valuable rights, and that the incentive should always be for people to work to try and participate with these rights through contributions. And so the grace period specifically has, in that sense, been constrained to what we as an operations team and you as science collaborations might want. What we have so far is that we have agreed with everybody that junior members should be supported if they leave the US and Chile and go outside the US and Chile to another international location. And so there is a grace period of up to 2 years. what the grace period would be if an international participant moved outside of their data rights holding institution to another international one, I think we will cover in the MOA. And we will try to the greatest extent possible, also be fair and assure the ability of especially younger junior researchers to continue their research. If it's older, more senior PIs moving from one place to another, then the sense is so far that they should work hard to remain at, not remain, but to contribute in continuing their data rights. So we'll have to see how that works. But the intent is to try and be fair. The intent will certainly be to work in the details in the MOA. Membership in science collaborations. The desk raised a reasonable objection, I think, to the language in the data rights policy, which this is a direct quote from the policy. Beyond the scientific use of LSST data as it's obtained, the benefits of data rights include all these things. And the first one is the right to apply for membership in the science collaborations. We actually said scientific collaborations. It should have said science collaborations. And the question is, why is this in there? Is it even necessary? And we agree that it's actually not. And we'll just remove this statement from the data rights policy. What this means is, and I think that the science collaborations should be as autonomous as possible. So we shouldn't be telling the science collaborations who they can collaborate with. And as long as the science collaborations adhere closely to the data rights policy as written, which means not sharing proprietary data with non-data rights holders, the science collaborations should be able to work with anyone they want. And that includes people that don't have data rights. So it's really up to you. This is true of people outside the science collaborations anyway. Anyone in the US and Chile can work with whoever they want under the conditions and the constraints of the data rights policy generally. So this is, I think, a simplification that should be good for everybody. Public data. What does it mean to say all the data are public? What is the project doing to enable public data serving? And can the science collaborations serve public data? So public data really right now means it's shareable. If you have data that has passed the proprietary period, there's no restriction on non-data rights holders seeing that data. Of course, they can't really see it if they can't get at it. So how are we going to serve it? This is something that we're working on and we don't yet have an answer for, but we will have an answer. One of the possibilities is that we will get significant in-kind contributions to help do this. In other words, some international collaborators could set up an access center that would serve the publicly shareable data, that is the data that's past proprietary period, to anyone in the world community. And there could be more than one. So that's the current best possibility for how we would do this generally, and we'll keep you updated as that progresses. The question was also asked, can the SCs serve public data? For example, DESK will have a lot of data at NERSC. They may keep certain data that becomes public at some point. Are they allowed to share it? Yes, they're allowed to share it. Will we support that? We will always do our best to support any of our science collaborations and users in what they're trying to do. I can't say specifically what that would be or how much we would be able to support, but we're open to discussing. It should be said that we don't expect public data right now to be served at the U.S. data facility. The current plans for the U.S. data facility are all built around serving proprietary data to data rights holders through the science platform. And so this public serving of data will be outside that, at least for now. That's the plan. An aspect of serving the public data is reproducibility. So both the science collaborations and the SAC have been very concerned about this particular aspect as well. You know, what if a group that has no data rights, never had data rights, wants to reproduce an LSST Rubin result? We actually think they should be able to do that. And how could they do it if they don't have access to the data? So this is just yet another powerful reason to ensure that we set up some process for serving the public data. And we are working on that, and we expect to make it happen one way or another. Requirements may also fall on derived data products if they're hosted by Rubin. And that's a use case that we haven't yet covered, but we'll need to consider going forward. Because there could be derived data products that are generally shareable. How do you make them shareable if I just said that the data facility is really for data rights holders? So that's something we have to figure out. And I'm just saying here in the last bullet that the SAC had a related concern generally for the public data, which is if you're a data rights holder and you publish results and then that data becomes public and is not hosted any longer at the data facility, how do you assure the ability to reproduce results by others in the LSST or the Rubin community? And so again, this is just another powerful argument that we need to solve this problem, which again we are committed to do. I think that's the last of the slides on the major concerns that have been raised at this point. And now I'll just open it up for discussion with you. What questions do you have? And how can we just keep this dialogue going?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bob, for catching us up on this. There's a few questions on the chat. I'm going to go in the order in which they were posted. And maybe if you have questions that you haven't posted on the chat, add them now. We'll get to them in the order in which they arrive. And actually, the first one is mine. One point that I wanted to make is that I think that the conferring builder status to members actually very much supports not only the science production, but the infrastructure, which is really needed in the science collaborations. It's less of an incentive to produce science within a science collaboration, but more an incentive to invest some of your time in non-scientific endeavors. So it's really important for the functioning of the science collaborations, which fosters more than the science that somebody would produce in the time in which they have data rights.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that.
And then there's another question. Maybe then let me catch up a question that I saw.
Let me say further in the builder status, it may be that to get this generally accepted by the agencies, that there has to be some kind of common understanding of what the criteria are for becoming a builder.
Perfect. So that gets me to Sugata's question, which is exactly that. How much effort and how, for example, how many FTEs would be needed to acquire builder status?
Right.
So that's something that we would need to agree with you on.
Other collaborative efforts. I know from experience that the DESI builder status, and even the one here on the construction project, is 2 years or 2 FTE or close to that. Maybe DESI's not quite 2, I'm not sure. But I think something reasonable along those lines that we could all agree to should be doable.
So just to be clear, we are talking about regulating builder status within a science collaboration, which doesn't affect the status with respect to papers in the same way in which the builder status of the project would do. So this doesn't confer right to be on publications of the Rubin Observatory, but on the publications of the science collaborations. Is that correct?
That's right. I think there would be some minimal set of criteria that each science collaboration should comply with that would be the same or similar. And then the science collaborations might also have other criteria from one to the next, I'm not sure. and they'll have their own rules on how to collaborate on their own papers, and we don't want to get involved in any of that. But right, this would not confer builder status in the same sense that the LSST construction project is making builders now.
Yeah.
It might be similar, but not the same, because those builders in the LSST project also have guaranteed data rights no matter where they go.
I think this answers all the questions about builder status that I see on the chat. If anybody that
I still have one. Yeah, I put
okay.
it in the chat. My understanding has always been that the science collaborations had quite a degree of, autonomousness. Is this builder status now being required of the science collaborations? I'm just not quite sure of how this fits structurally. The science collaborations make up their own tiers of what they consider membership levels. Can you explain how does this exactly fit together?
I think I agree with you that the science collaborations should remain autonomous from the operations team. We have to support you in ways that we can support you, but we don't want to tell you what to do as much as to the greatest extent possible. So I don't think that there's a requirement that a science collaboration have a builder status if they really don't want one. I think the point was that at least some of the science collaborations see this as important as Fed was saying, to incentivize their folks to work hard and produce things that will get the science out. And for us, that's the main reason to support it, because we also want the science out. That's the main reason we're doing this. But I don't see any reason why you have to have a builder status if you don't want one. I don't want to tell you what to do in that regard.
But so, in fact, I think Meg brings up a good point. I don't see how this builder status, if it's phrased like that, I don't see how the builder status interferes in any ways with any of the publication policy and data rights, right? Because we always said intellectual contribution grants allows people to be on publication, and the restriction is only on seeing the data and working directly on data that lead to a publication. So does the builder status then allow to see the data for impermanency as a member of the science collaboration?
If they have data rights, yes. I think the point was that this builder for permanent data rights for someone in the collaboration.
It does grant permanent data rights through the science collaboration to members that may exist.
I think we would work with the science collaborations because they would be the ones that would verify and track the effort, and we would have agreed that that was a significant enough contribution that they should have earned permanent data rights for that contribution.
Yes. So, Mike, does that answer your question?
No, I think these are two different things, right? Let's call it, I feel like there's two different types of things. There's something within the science collaborations, which can be whatever. We call it architect status in Solar System Science Collaboration, because half of our papers are with data that's public. People are not going to go through a publication policy and stick everyone on it. It's a suggested, these are people you might want to put on your paper. But I can't make anyone like Desk can, because all that data that people need to do their science is proprietary. So if you tell me that every paper from the SSE has to have a builder on it, that's not going to happen, because people just can write it without even going through the science collaboration. I think it feels to me like these are two different things. Like, this is granting data right indefinitely. And so I feel like let's call it something else that's not builder. That's why we're using architect within our science collaboration, because it's a different term so people don't confuse it with builder status. So maybe we can give it a different title and say, look, it grants you this, not any of the publication stuff, but it acknowledges, or it can, depending on your science collaboration, but just put in the bit in that says this grants you data rights. And, does that, and whether that means if you didn't have data rights or you moved somewhere where it didn't, that you would get it or continue it. I feel like that's the bit maybe that goes in there, and we untie this from publications and other things.
So yes, I think the science collaborations, we can discuss among ourselves what are the current existing statuses that we would like to maintain and how they're named inside of the science collaboration, and come up with a suggestion for the project to call this permanent data right through the science collaboration acquisition, if that's okay.
And just to be clear, this is not a way around an international contribution. That is, the science collaborations will not be allowed to just accept anyone, have them get builder status, and then have data rights. Okay, they have to come into the collaboration at some point through either the U.S.-Chile status or an international MOA, and then they can get builder status.
So this is an extension of data rights for people that have at some point had data rights.
This is ensuring that people who have data rights and have contributed don't lose them. Not a way to get data rights generally if you're outside the U.S. and Chile.
So this ties me to another question, which is mine also, which is, can you remind us what is the grace period? You mentioned that there is a grace period for junior members, but we had a discussion more than once about what the duration of that grace period should be to enable.
Yeah, it's 2 years right now.
So I think the science collaboration has suggested extending it to 3 years, which is the duration of a typical temporary position, like a postdoc abroad.
You did, and I was unsuccessful in getting you what you wanted.
But I seem to recall. Okay. Aprojita asks if the science collaborations would then be responsible to ensure that no SC member provides proprietary data to any non-data right holders that are in the science collaboration. I guess if I understand, if you open the science collaborations to non-data right members, who is responsible to control that people in science collaborations that don't have data rights don't see the data?
That's right. Just like anyone else who has access to the data is expected not to share it with people, the same would be true of the science collaboration, and to not share it with people in the sense of what's written in the data policy. So even if you're not in a science collaboration and you have access because you have an account and you can get into the data facility, we expect, and we're not going to go around policing it in any detailed way, that you don't share the data. And the same would be true of the science collaboration.
Will you describe reporting methods and similar actions that can be taken if those rules are violated? I remember the position used to be, we're not going to seek information, but if information is reported.
Right? Mm-hmm. There are consequences if these are, willfully and continually violated, and it goes up to including, banning people from having data rights. But it's in the policy already. And again, we don't expect to go around actively policing this in certain ways. We'll have a certain way that people sign in and get access to the data facility, and then we expect that people will obey the rules.
So I want to be mindful of time. We want to switch over to Phil. Rachel M, did you want to ask the question? Or do we want to, feel free if you think that it's timely, otherwise we can move this offline. But I think it might be important.
Yeah, sorry, Phil.
We cannot. You're coming off really distorted. You're sounding very, very distorted. I'm going to read your question.
Does this work or no? Okay.
So Rachel's question in the chat is, let me check a scenario. A postdoc in the UK spends 2 years working on science collaboration infrastructure. As such, they qualify for science collaboration builder status. Are they then not eligible for permanent data rights because they're not from the US or Chile?
No, assuming that they started in the UK as a data rights holder because they were part of the UK agreement. And I don't think that means they have to be a PI. If they were included in the UK agreement as a data rights holder, and then they've achieved builder status, they would have permanent builder.
Okay, one last question from Meg. Then, are the science collaboration able to make their own decision about being open to non-data right holders? As a reminder, right now the science collaboration are not open to non-data right holders. Will you require homogeneous rules about this? I certainly
do not want to. I, as an operations team, will not decide who can be in the science collaboration.
So, but I want to add that we should also discuss this with the SAC and with Michael, because if the science collaboration membership allows access to support for international contribution, participation in the CEC, etc., then there might be consequences in terms of the amount of support that somebody can receive by being inside of a science collaboration to produce an in-kind contribution. But I think this is a separate discussion. So perhaps we'll talk about it with the SAC that is drafting the charter for us.
Okay, I didn't really follow that, but I trust that you'll take care of it.
Yeah. Do we want to switch over to Phil?
So, Fred, I also posed a question. I'm not sure if this has been asked. Will there be some criteria required for the different science collaborations to assign builder status? Or we just be left for them to decide with no criteria?
Francisco, I think Bob said there will be some general minimal requirements that will be agreed.
There will have to be, and that will have to be, we'll certainly have to run that through the agencies for their agreement, what that means. And then for this particular type of status that ensures continuing data rights, the collaborations would have to comply with that in some way.
All right, I think we can switch over to Phil.
All right, thanks, Fed. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Before I do that, I'm going to turn off my video because I'm having some upload bandwidth issues here. So sorry about that.
And I will leave at exactly 12:58, but somebody will be taking over for me, whoever feels comfortable in checking the questions. Continue asking the questions on the chat.
But I can do it.
Thank you, Meg.
Okay, bear with me a second. Okay, share screen. Okay, you see my browser?
Yes, now we do.
And now, just trying to make it big for you. Loading. Okay, you see my title slide?
Yes. We have some delay, so just be mindful of that. It's a few seconds.
Okay, we'll do. Hopefully it'll catch up while I'm explaining what this is. Okay, so this is a overview of Rubin Operations, and based on slides that we made for the recent joint agency review of Rubin Operations, so it should be up to date. And I thought this might be useful to maintain as a sort of general purpose high level introduction to the Rubin Operations plan. And so I've made the deck commentable, and I'm open to suggestions of other things that would be useful to include. And if we work it up a little bit, perhaps it will be useful as a standing introduction tool. Okay, so having said that, I'll try not to assume too much knowledge of Rubin Operations already, but I will try and focus on some relatively new things. So you may not have seen our mission statement, which was developed this year. I put it up here on the screen for you. The observatory's mission is to create a vast astronomical data set and web-based analysis environment for unprecedented discovery of the deep and dynamic universe. And with that mission statement, we now have a vision statement, which does mention the LSST. And the vision is to provide the community with the data to address some of the most fundamental questions in astrophysics, advance the field of astronomy, and engage the public in the discovery process. And so this was important to us to get a clear mention of the route all the way through to the public understanding of science in the vision for the observatory. Okay, so operations planning. Where are we? Well, we're keeping calm and carrying on despite various roadblocks and pandemics and so on. I'll try and touch on that as we go through the slides. But the basics. We have 3 phases of operations. Survey operations is when we're actually taking data and doing data releases with the full system. Before survey operation starts, we have a pre-operations period. That's the one we're now in. And we're also planning a post-operations period during which the observatory wouldn't be taking data, but we'd still be processing and preparing the final data release. So in pre-ops, what are we doing? We are defining our operations plan. We're currently in between the preliminary and detailed plan phases. That plan includes the staffing for the operations team, including the transition from construction, which I'll show you a little bit about in a second. And then various activities that we need to carry out in order to achieve readiness to execute the survey. And especially these are the data previews that you've seen at the PCW and which I'll remind you about in a minute. So right now, the start of the survey, the LSST survey, is scheduled for October 2022. However, we should expect that date to slip just because right now, as you know, the summit is closed for COVID-19. And so we'll need to replan. The construction project will be doing replanning or re-baseline, they call it, this fall. Okay, so flexibility has always been part of operations planning. It's just even more important now. So the data previews. Here's a chart that we showed at the PCW last summer. The later phases of the data previews, those that depend on the commissioning data, those are the ones that we should expect to slip because of the construction delays. But we're focusing on the first data preview, DP0, and are collaborating with LSST Desk. We'd like to use their large-scale simulated dataset in DP0, and that would be our main project for FY21. DP1 and DP2, as I said, will involve commissioning data, so we should expect them to be delayed, and we'll know more this fall. So data previews are important to us. They're basically the activities through which we'll develop our capability to produce, verify, and release LSST data. And we hope that the science community finds them useful in their own preparations as well. Okay, so we're on track with operations planning. We are identifying staff, starting with the leadership, but filling out the plan. We understand the objective of operations and will be working on deriving requirements and key performance metrics from them later this year. We have a robust plan in hand that will improve in the remaining years of pre-ops. We're working on various challenges, addressing risks and planning budgets and so on. So this is what I'm going to try and give you a bit of a flavor of. Okay, so things that you should know. Rubin Operations is a 50-50 partnership between NOIRLab and SLAC, also NSF, so I should say NSF/Aura, sorry, and DOE. So in pictorial terms, you can see here that there's an operations team that has some internal structure to it that I'll describe. And we have an oversight system based around a management board, which provides a forum for Aura and SLAC to talk to each other, the NOIRLab director and the SLAC director to be in the same room solving problems for us together. They're connected to this joint oversight group, which is the DOE and NSF. We're already meeting with the joint oversight group on a weekly basis, and Aura and SLAC, NOIRLab and SLAC are invited to that. In terms of the internal structure of the operations team, we are organized according to the information flow through the observatory system. So we have 4 technical departments and a director's office. And these 4 technical departments are shown here in the green boxes. And they're defined according to the main thing that they need to do, the main thing they need to produce. So observatory operations collects images using the telescope. The data production department takes those images and turns them into alert and catalog data products. and then makes those available to the science community. The system performance department is going to look to take feedback from the community so we can learn from it and then optimize the survey and the system. And then we have an education and public outreach department whose job is to inform and engage the public using the data products that are produced by data production and all the lessons we learn from system performance. So that's the idea. We can remap that information flow diagram into an org chart. Here it is. And I've just written out here the 4 technical departments, director's office, and basically a one-sentence summary of what they're going to be doing. So each of these departments is going to be managed by a associate director. Those ADs will form a little executive council that will support the director and oversees operations progress. So right now you're used to hearing about the project science team in the construction project. The executive council in operations is the closest thing we have to that. It's more of a management organization though. It's the people who are in charge of the different departments getting together to solve problems. That ops exec includes an additional role, which is the head of science for LSST. So this is someone who represents the science community within that ops exec. So it's a key point of contact for the science collaborations and the rest of the LSST science community. And the idea is that they'll be there in the room while decisions are getting made about how the data are produced, how the observatory is operated. Okay, so who are the people involved in these roles? So the key personnel, the ops exec is listed here. In the director's office, we have Bob Blum, Amanda Bauer, our deputy directors, Jean Ivasic is head of science for LSST. In the ADs for the different departments, we have Chuck Claver in observatory operations, Will Omerlan is leading the data production department, Leanne Guy is head of department for system performance, and Amanda Bauer is doing double duty at the moment as AD for education and public outreach. Okay, so there are a couple of other people who sit in the executive. So we have 2 program coordinators, one for NOIRLab, one for SLAC. And so these are people that help with the details of budget planning and that kind of thing. So that's Kathy Petrie at NOIRLab, Christine Sobel at SLAC. We also have some executive assistants at the moment, Amy Wiest at NOIRLab and Heather Shaughnessy at SLAC. We've also begun to identify and work with various other significant actors, mainly team leaders, which I'll get to in a second. So here's the org chart with a bit more detail on it. The departments are subdivided into teams according to our work breakdown structure. So we know what activities we need to do to make operations work, and there's a team for each key activity, basically. So these teams will plan work together based on milestones set by the exec, and those team leaders will act as functional supervisors for the team members, which are coming from various different host institutions. And those team leaders will provide feedback to the host institutions on how the people are doing. So if you stare at the small print here a little bit, you can see that the observatory operations department has a team understanding how well the observatory is working. That's the scientists. A team working on the software that makes the observatory run, and then quite a big team based at the summit doing the actual observing and the engineering work. Within data production, there are 3 teams down the left-hand side that basically make the data facilities work, actually carry out the processing of the data and maintain the software that handles that workflow. And then on the right-hand side are more of the people that you know best. So the algorithms and pipelines teams that will be maintaining the LSST science pipelines and improving them using community feedback. And then also the team that maintains the science platform. Okay, so over in system performance, this is the optimization group. They have 4 teams. There's a team that works on verification and validation of the data products. It's good to have them outside of the data production team so that they're able to do good testing that way. There's a community engagement team that will provide a strong interface between the science community and the data production department, basically a channel for getting good feedback back to the data production people. System performance also includes survey scheduling, so optimizing the observing strategy year by year. That's what that group will be simulating and maintaining the scheduler code. And then we have a systems engineering team that maintains technical oversight over the whole system and looks for ways to improve it. In the EPO department, they're divided into 3 teams specialized in the different types of things you have to do to make EPO work well. So they have a technical team that works on web design, widget development, that kind of software work, and then an education team and an outreach team that thinks about the different audiences for education and outreach. Okay, so same diagram, but now colored in according to where the people are coming from. So blue shows NOIRLab, red is Slack. These are the 2 operations partners. That's not to say that all of the people in these teams would be at either of those 2 institutions. Actually, they'll both have subcontractors and affiliate institutions to help provide the staff that we need. So the teams are fully integrated. You see a lot of red and blue shading in the teams, but they also include expertise brought in from construction and also from the outside. So where are the construction folks going in operations? Well, you see here those from telescope and site, systems engineering, DM science platform and algorithms, the scheduling team, the EPO team. They're in the NOIRLab part of the plan. Meanwhile, Slack and its affiliate labs, that's Fermilab and Brookhaven, will provide staff that are coming from the LSST CAM construction project. Also DM's middleware team. There's people, well, one person who comes from the LSST desk who's now working in operations, that's me. And then Fermilab is providing staff that have experience from DES data production and community support. Okay, so a little bit more detail. This is useful to know about how the data production works internally. So I mentioned 3 teams that make the data facilities work. Well, here's a zoom in on the data production department that shows that we have multiple data facilities will be at work in data production. So the green bars are showing those data facilities. There'll be one in the US, location TBD, and then one in France at CCI and 2P3. And we're anticipating another one in the UK that could take on up to 25% of the data release processing. The French data facility will do 50% of the data release processing, and the US data facility will do the rest, and then all of the alert processing. And so the idea is that these modules can be fitted together into the data production department in the way you see. The administrative heads of those data facilities will have a direct line to the AD for data production, and then they'll provide staff that are in touch with each other through the teams in the department. Okay, so the US data facility, I said its location was not yet decided. That's true. It is well scoped though. We do know what it has to do. We just don't yet know where it's going to be. Why don't we know where it's going to be? Well, this is a consequence of this still somewhat new 50-50 joint agency funding model. That prompted some investigation of possible alternative locations for the US data facility. So in construction, they're building what we can think of as a prototype data facility at NCSA. This is the set of computers and people that will develop the processes for data production and then use them in commissioning. So the question is, how are we going to build on that prototype to run the actual US data facility? So the operations team did an investigation of the 3 DOE labs as potential data facility hosts, found that all 3 are viable alternatives to NCSA. And inspired by that investigation, DOE will put out a funding opportunity announcement in the next few months, inviting competitive bids from any academic or commercial institution. So we expect that selection process to be completed in the winter. That's something for you to be aware of. Okay, so I said construction staff are moving into operations. Not all of them are, so some of them will move off to other construction projects, either within NOIRLab or in the DOE labs or elsewhere. But plenty of them will stay on, actually. So here's a chart that shows the end of construction left, ramping into the operations staffing through the right. And so we're kind of narrowing down from narrowing some of the construction staff down, adding a few more from around the DOE labs, and ending up with a staff of around 168 people in FY23 when survey operations starts. And the green, the coloured bars show you something of the split between the different departments. You can see data production is our biggest department, as you might expect, for a survey facility of our kind, but significant effort in observatory operations as well. Okay, so I mentioned the UK looking to provide a third data facility. That's part of their in-kind proposal, which I know you've all been following somewhat closely. But here's a one-slide summary of the emerging in-kind program at Rubin Observatory. So we now know 41 international groups, that is non-US and Chile, are seeking data rights for nearly 600 PIs in return for in-kind contributions to Rubin and the LSST survey. This is mostly sort of adding value to the survey. There's a few $1 million worth of in-kind contributions from the UK that could offset the cost of operations, but almost all of the program will be enhancing the LSST science program and the Rubin Observatory. And we do this in the form of providing follow-up time, complementary data sets, science infrastructure, software development, and so on. So as some of you know very well, we now have a community-centered contribution evaluation committee. Some of you are here listening. That's established and has been meeting for a couple of months now. It's evaluating the proposed contributions through the rest of this year. We will have a couple of international program coordinators within the director's office to help track these contributions, and they will provide information to an agency level resource board that will oversee this large program. Okay, we're currently revising our schedule in the CEC to account for COVID-19 and the reduction in productivity that it has brought us. So here you see pictorially the new schedule that we'll be proposing to the agencies this week. Basically, it has the CEC collecting and synthesizing feedback for Bob and I to transmit by the end of July, so that the international groups can finish their full proposals during August and September. They can then be reviewed formally by the CEC with recommendations set to the agencies by the end of the year. What's a full proposal? Well, it's basically, it will be designed such that the content of that proposal can be easily rearranged into a statement of work for a data rights agreement. That's what we're aiming for the international groups, plus a so-called detailed plan that specifies trackable goals. And that's under development at the moment. Okay, I think this is my last slide. We do maintain a risk register helped by NOIRLab. They host it for us. But all the risks are our own, in the sense that these are the things that we have to worry about to make sure operations run smoothly. Our top two risks at the moment involve our risks to operations readiness, and they're associated with construction delays as a result of COVID-19, but also uncertainty in where the data facility will be on the US side. So we're mitigating both those risks. They are now realized. We'll be doing a couple of things specifically, but basically our approach is to try and stay on schedule for the data previews, starting with DP0, while continuing to match our plans to the projects. The delay in knowing where the US data facility is coincides with the expected delay due to the coronavirus. And so there's a way we can match them together. So we'll work with the project this year as it does its replanning. We'll try and take into account the science community's capacity to prepare as well. But basically, we're trying to stay on track with DP0. In order to execute DP0, we are currently identifying an interim data facility and enable that data production department to and the community engagement team to carry out those DP0 activities. So reprocess images, produce a catalog, provide it to the science collaborations and the rest of the science community, and support it and start taking good feedback from you all. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks very much for listening.
Okay, I'm happy to sort of go through the questions since Federica is probably got to leave soonish. One question that came up, actually it's mine, is so the science collaborations have liaisons to a data management liaison and a commissioning liaison right now. And so I didn't hear you mention liaisons for the science collaborations. Is there someone within that sort of science community, one of those boxes? Will there be that kind of structure of the science collaborations having like a point person in that community support group to, I guess, to be able to be their go-to for questions, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question. So right now we don't have that in our plan, but I know that, well, other than this head of science position, which we see as a sort of key point of contact for the science collaborations, but I understand it's not the same as a liaison for each collaboration. I think that's something we should look at. I think it works well in the project right now with the system science team. And so we could imagine members of the community engagement team being assigned to each science collaboration in order to try to maintain that system. But it's those people are the ones that would be the liaisons, the community engagement team.
Okay, we're running a little over, but I think we probably want to get these 2 or 3 questions in and then call it. Aprajita, do you want to ask your question?
Well, it's not. It's just a point of clarification. So just in terms of the data processing fraction, the bulk or the largest share will be in France, and what was being offset would be the 50% of the US contribution. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And those charts that you showed with the FT level of effort, so the green bars that corresponded to the data production, was that just that 50% of the US fraction and not including any international effort?
Yeah, that's right. This is a deficiency in this plot. We need to add the CCI and 2P3 staff. At the moment, this is only showing US staff. Yeah.
And Federica, I don't know if you're still here, if you want to ask your question or comment.
Go ahead. I was here for yeah, I'm already late. I trust you. Bye.
Bye. So she's just saying that the facility is a big topic because depending on where it is, there might be restrictions, based on U.S. government policies. So, and she's just asking, would it help if the SEs were producing a memo about concerns relating to this or their thoughts on this? Just, I guess, people thinking about international access and possible restrictions, given if it's at a government lab versus not. I don't know. So I guess she's basically asking, would it be helpful if the science collaborations give you something about their thoughts on it in writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always useful for us to hear from the science community about concerns, and so I I would say, yeah, do please put together a memo. I would say though that the actual location of the data facility may not be very important in this regard. The key point is that the US agencies own the data, and so no matter where the data facility is, it's them that will get to decide how the access to data is administered. Bob, do you want to add anything to that?
Only that I don't see any major issue here with the types of institutions that we expect to do it. I mean, even if it's one of the DOE labs, they currently do the same thing with internationals everywhere around the world. So I don't see a big issue here. What Phil said is right. The thing is who the agencies want to give the data to.
Okay, well, I'll make sure Federica gets that feedback. And then Rachel, it sounds like your question's the last one, so why don't we wrap up with that? Since you had tech issues, I can try this time to ask it. So she's just saying the same thing in terms of the interim, or rather same topic. Interim data facility is meant to be a distinct from both NCSA as a prototype data facility and the eventual final USDF choice, i.e. NCSA equals a prototype, then potentially someplace else has an interim data facility, and then final USDF chosen next year.
We haven't decided yet where the interim data facility is, but we will very soon, and then that question will be answered. It is possible that NCSA could be the interim data facility. It's possible that other options let me restate that. Other options exist as well, and we're actively working on this right now.
We're 5 minutes over, so unless there's any burning questions, why don't we call it for this month's call?
Sounds good. I said at the beginning, just to remind you, these slides are commentable. So if you do have more questions or suggestions for other things that it would be useful to hear about, feel free to drop them in as slide comments, and I'll try and answer them.
Great, thanks. Do we have the link in the? I'm not sure we got the link,
yes.
But it's probably in the document, in the notes. So
yeah,
great.
It's at the top of the doc.
Perfect. All right. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.